Sawyer County Works Committee meeting to order. Certified compliance with open meeting law. Lindsay, take roll call, please.
Ron Kinsley,
Here.
Mark Helwig. Mark Helwig. Mark Helwig. I see his name. Ed Peters. Dale Olson.
Here.
Brian Bissonnette.
Here.
Let the record indicate we have a quorum. Meeting agenda's in front of us. There's no changes to that. Next item is public comment. Does anybody have anything for public comment?
Yes, I do, if you can hear me. My name is Dan Bursell. Can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Good evening. Again, I'm Dan Bursell. I'm the principal that holds a ground hangar lease at the airport under Hannah Bay Holdings. I understand that there's been work done by the committee involving the status and inventory of the current hangar ground leases. I noted that at least the version of the agenda for this meeting that I was sent contained discussion of that matter in a closed session. I'd like to have the record show that I object to holding a discussion of that topic in a closed session because I don't believe it conforms to the exemption associated with the Wisconsin statute associated with open meetings.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything for public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to number 5. Consideration approval of the minutes from the previous meeting of January 13th. On approval. Motion by Mr. Edwards. Peters, I'm sorry. I'll second the motion so we can move forward. We have a motion, a second, to approve the minutes as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 6, Sawyer County Airport, Hayward Aviation. Airport report. Derek, Mr. Leslie, are you there?
Ron, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right. Good evening. First off, any questions on my report? It's kind of a bunch of different things in there. You read through it, and I don't know if there's much that you guys want to discuss at the meeting tonight, but certainly some things coming up in the future that are going to need to be addressed on the board level.
What stands out in your report that you want to tell us, Derek?
Well, everything's going pretty good out at the airport. In particularly, Tim and his crew have been doing a really good job with snow removal. We've had a light winter so far, but this last storm was a pretty heavy one, but we've been doing a really good job keeping the runways open. And Tim has kind of overcome some adversity with some staffing folks being on vacation and sick as well. And he and his department have picked up the slack and got the job done. So I'd like to commend him for that.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I believe this report details things out pretty good, unless a committee member wants to discuss things further.
No, it looks good to me. Anybody else in the committee have questions for Derek? Hearing none, Derek, why don't you touch a little bit on letter B, which is entitlements received, spent, and remaining. That's always interesting because it's constantly changing and we always have projects coming.
Well, and it is, and I hope you guys could hear me okay. I want to try to keep it short because I know it's difficult through the Zoom meetings, but you know, we've got this big project coming up this spring, and that's going to eat up 4 full years worth of our entitlements. The county gets an allotment of entitlements every year in the sum of $150,000. So that's all going to be getting used in the spring on our ramp and taxi lane reconstruction project. That being said, it's also detailed in the report, July of 21, possibly August, our 2021 entitlements will become available. And then every year after that, they'll become available. And the Bureau of Aeronautics is in charge of that money. And we're going to be in the process in the near future of petitioning because our runway is at the end of its life expectancy. So the runway is going to be 2023, 2024 in that time period where the BOA is going to be pushing for us to work on getting that replaced. And part of that is kind of an overall synopsis of the things that are needed at the airport. Working on that 6-year improvement plan, I think, is going to be really important for me, Tom Hoff, the administrator, to kind of look at the needs of the airport and what the anticipated projects might be in the future, what the funding sources for those projects might be. And I think that we'll probably end up coming to committee with some recommendations for discussions. I talked with Tim Hadberg as well before the meeting tonight, because in his involvement in snow removal, another thing to be considered is the fact that we don't have a snow removal equipment shelter at the airport as well, which is high on our priority list. So an update on entitlements is that we're going to hopefully use them. A big thing in figuring out the budget in the upcoming years with the administration is figuring out where the 5% is going to come from for the county's share for those projects.
Eric, when you talk about replacing the runway, what does that really involve?
Well, we're not going to make the runway any longer. We're not going to make the runway any wider. Essentially, we're just going to be ripping the runway up, redoing the base course underneath it, and laying it back down the same way it is now. Runways typically get 20 years on them. Once runways get to 25 years, then it's red flagged, essentially, and you start getting into issues with the federal grants and assurances that the county has signed by taking this money in the past. The runway is not in terrible shape right now, but our joints are starting to separate. 2 years ago, we had the joints sealed, but they're starting to get to be 3, some places 4 inches thick. So it makes to be a FOD issue where there's rocks and different debris out on the runway that can damage aircraft, as well as our snow removal equipment. It'll be, by the time we do the runway, it'll be due. And cost estimations for that right now, at least, are upwards of $3 million.
Good explanation. Thank you. Anybody from the committee have questions for Derek? Hearing
I
none.
got you, Mr. Chairman. I got one
Yes,
question,
yes.
if you don't mind. Tom, is our 5% match on this entire project in the budget then for 2021?
Yeah, we budget for that, and the unused portion we set aside until the date that we use it. So the prior year's funding we have set aside, and then we keep accumulating that until they're used on a project. And they expire after a certain amount, so we have to keep on top of that.
Anybody else have questions? Hearing none, we're going to move on. Thank you, Derek. Number 7, Highway Commissioners Report. Welcome, Gary.
Does anyone have any questions on the report?
You do a good job of putting it together.
One thing I'd like to point out in the 3rd paragraph, I think it's pretty important. We got that funding. We're going to be, looks pretty good where you get that funding through BIA on that bridge over on County E over Cruderay River. This is a really good thing. We've done this one other time before. It gets thrown in the queue, and we didn't get our funding. We got it as a back payment, and we still got the money. But from the sounds of it, sounds like it's going to be current year. So that will be nice.
How's it working out following with our individual pickup?
So that's working out fine. Yeah, it's actually been a nice truck to have. We're taking care of the bridge, and we've also just selected one person from each shop that can run that truck because we don't want to have a whole bunch of people running it. We're using it to clear off our bridge decks, which has been very handy. And just note, as far as the crew in this cold weather, we've been doing a lot of indoor work. We've had them cleaning trucks inside and out, greasing. We've had out, some trucks, snow and ice control drifting. And we actually had them out today shoveling bridge decks. We're having them again tomorrow. Then next week we'll get back into and we start to get the temps back up in double digits. We'll be out back flush.
Will they have time that they can clean the intersections back a little bit before they move?
Yeah, I think they started doing that today. Yeah, we're just trying to not put anyone out working now. So,
Thank you. Yes.
Gary, what is the VIA amount they're giving for that bridge?
$136,000 roughly. It's our 20% match. And if you look in our budget, it says 128, but I think they added the engineering that we've already paid for. I think they added it in that match amount. It was 8,000 more than anticipated. And just so everyone knows, this has no impact at all whatsoever on the LCO tribe's funding levels or anything. So it isn't a hit that LCO went and put in for these funds. So it isn't like, okay, they get these funds, now they're going to have less money to work on local roads within the reservation. That's not the case. It's a separate funding mechanism.
Good to point out.
Yeah. Thank you.
Overtime report.
Okay, overtime report, I have to give a little explanation on why there's negative numbers. In actuality, we had, well, you can see we had 167.5 state overtime hours. We actually had 232.25 overtime hours on the county. But because the employees have the ability starting January, I think it's January through October and November, they can earn comp time. So, and they have to use all that comp time from 2020 up by the last pay period, I believe, of the year, something like that. So there's no carryover on the books. So what happens is when they get their overtime, they normally turn it into comp time to get their balances built up. So that's why it shows a negative on there. In actuality, that's what we had.
Everything else looks pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, we're down. We're down from last year's overtime.
That's always a good thing. Next item we have is letter C. Annual renewal of existing ATV, UTV memorandum of understanding MOUs.
Okay, so in February of every year, we examine our ATV UTV routes and it comes before this committee for approval. I've attached the resolution, the original resolution. I've attached a blank letter of understanding. That's what we have with the sponsor club. And I've also attached the current 2021 routes. Mr. Pete Edwards here brought a correction to my attention, or Ed Peters.
I'm sorry.
But anyway, when you look on double G's, it's State Highway 70 to Dead Horse, and I've got Crazy Horse, thinking about Ojibwa too much. So it's Dead Horse. I'll make the correction on my end.
Good catch, Mr. Pete.
And I will.
Mr. Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gary, I don't want to put you on the spot because you may not know these numbers. And I understand we need to have these ATV routes. I have no issue with that. I think some roads are far better than others. But do we have any fatalities or any major problems on any of these routes?
No, that's what I was just gonna start to say. I don't have any major problems. I mean, we did have, I think it was 2 years ago, not this past summer, I think it was the summer before, we had an accident on W involving an ATV and a vehicle. And I think that was a driver error thing. And then we did receive a complaint on speeding up on the County Road T up near Nelson Lake route. I talked with the sheriff and he performed patrols up there, and of course we didn't get anyone. And then I didn't hear anything else. So it wasn't a repetitive thing. No one called me back to say that, so.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks a lot.
Gary, are we finding that, remember we were really concerned about that route on B, where, Haskins Road, I think, it went on B and then went down towards Famous Days or something in there. You were really concerned with the use of that highway and how busy it was, and ATVs. What are you finding now that
I'm
we're a year
finding
into it?
extremely low use. I have yet to see an ATV out there, but we also have no complaints.
Because, I went to that Snowmobile ATV Alliance meeting, what was it, a week or two back?
Third week in January.
Yeah, and we looked at the map, and a lot of people that we're looking at, there was a big space right in the middle where there's no trails. And it involves Highway B. So just putting that out there, that maybe in the future we can consider, a lot of people want that. And I know how strongly you felt about that safety.
Right, but there's
And
a
the
little
business highway.
difference. There's a little difference in the speeds. Where you're going right into a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. Relatively good sight distance. When you start getting east of Double C, which is the gap I believe you're referring to, that's not good.
East of Double C.
Blue Heron or Rusty.
Yeah.
Because right now
What
the
about
trail,
Double C West? And I'm just throwing it out there.
the trail runs from New Post up to Double C or up to County Road B on Double C.
Yeah.
And then there's an end sign there and that's it. We can't go into it.
Yeah.
But I had 2 requests. They haven't come to the committee yet. They may not ever get to the committee because I looked at them day before yesterday. I looked at them, drove them, and there are 2 roads that they're not a mix. They're not a good mix of traffic. And I can tell you what they are. The lower portion of County Road up. From Highway 48 up to Edgewater, and then County Road Double D, which is off of that, and you share it with Washburn County. They about 50-50. They have to go the other half. And they're not in favor of it. So I don't even know if it's going to come to this committee if they're going to present it.
We'll just wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
Any other questions, discussion for Gary? If not, we have this resolution in front of us.
Motion to approve, sir.
Is that Dale?
Motion by Mr. Olson to approve. Second by Mr. Peters to second the motion. Any further discussion?
It's not really the resolution, it's a renewal. What is it on? Oh, I'm sorry.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the renewal.
No, that's just the resolution. It's just the thing on you guys.
What do
Do you want me to, what I can do, if that's an example resolution from 2018, just as you said, Gary, I can update that for a new resolution for the, for this committee, and then you'll have it before the board meeting, so that your resolution that you would pass tonight would be in incorporation
But
of.
that isn't necessary. That isn't necessary. All we're doing is an annual renewal. We already have, the county board's already adopted a resolution, which has an attachment with a letter of resolution. We are just simply doing the annual renewal of the existing MOUs. Nothing to do with the resolution.
Right,
Because we did the same thing last year. You drafted this with me back in
in 18.
2018.
Mhm.
So we've just been approving the So the form is, it's with the sponsor club.
Right.
That's what we're renewing.
And I'm not saying that would change at all. All I'm saying is if you wanted a resolution saying that this committee approves the update that you included, that's what it's doing. Not that it's changing anything, it's just accepting the new laws. So just a memorialization of the decision here, not changing anything else. But
Well, I'm not trying to argue, but it doesn't reference. It's a standalone document.
So what do we call?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Oh, sweet, thank you.
Mr. Helwig, go ahead.
I just wanted to see if you guys could hear me. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So it's the renewal of the letter of understanding.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've got however many there are, 20, I don't know. So Don signed 20 some MOUs with me.
Okay,
It's just renewing those.
Mr. Olson, are you okay with that wording for making the motion?
I would accept that as a friendly amendment.
Mr. Peters is okay with that?
That's fine.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Me too.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Gary. Maintenance Department report. Welcome, Tim.
Any questions on the report at all?
What stands out we need to know about how's the mailboxes are done?
Oh, yeah, yeah, getting well used. Otherwise, like Derek already touched on, we've been, we've ended up, doing a fair amount of plowing right now at the airport. We had a, LTE on vacation and then now filling in for him. So we've been, doing that, just trying to keep everything going as normal.
You do a good job. All right. Yeah,
Dale Olson.
Mr. Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tim, I just wanted to broach something. We had some issues with vehicle repair the last few years there. I can only speak from my own experience. Are we still having those, or has it gotten better?
I think we're using, EMS uses 2 shops, the rest of the fleet goes to 1. I believe we've been in, we've got a new service manager. That we've been in a lot of communication with. I think things are going pretty smooth right at the moment.
All right, thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
We move forward. Number 9, second courtroom discussion only. We are honored to have Mr. John King here with us. And Mr. Huff, you want to give us an update before we start?
Sure. Yes, we've had a lot of discussion about this over the years, actually. Starting back in 2017, the county board passed a resolution supporting a Second Circuit Court and supporting the facilities and personnel required to run a Second Circuit Court. So since that time, we've been looking at options on how and where that second courtroom would be placed. And we looked at a lot of different options on the footprint of this lot that the county courthouse is on, trying to fit that second courthouse, here, there, everywhere, and make it work. Since that time, we've had discussions with the city about extending California Avenue and closing 5th Street, which would allow us to build that second courtroom across what is currently 5th Street between the jail and the county courthouse facility. And that was really a nice thing to have happen, that cooperation with the city that allows us to best utilize that space, because that really helps out on the security and transport of prisoners and staff as they move between the court and the jail. So that's a good thing to have happen. And the county board passed a resolution or an agreement with the city to extend California Avenue and close Fifth Street. So we've got that behind us as well. The last thing that we need to work on is the funding of the courthouse. As you recall, in our budget discussions, we did have placeholders in the budget for this construction. And so we've re-engaged Mr. Keene's firm, the architect who we worked with originally, and we've had him up talking with all of the staff, sheriff, judge, clerk of courts, everyone who's affected by the use of the court space to ensure that the planning that we've been doing is not only adequate and functional, but secure and meeting the requirements of what a courtroom needs to be. So we've had the district court administrator on the line with us as well as we went through these discussions. So Mr. Keene has got some information that he'll share kind of where we're at, or at least where we were this morning. And after some discussions, we've had a couple more revelations that I think will improve the layout. You know, as we started looking at options, you know, we had a footprint, a square footage of the courtroom that we currently have, and we're moving that around on this lot, trying to figure out where the best spot is. Once we got the Fifth Street option available, we kind of plunked that square footage between there, and that works. But the discussion that we had today, specifically with the sheriff's department, where they really took some time to analyze the workflow, the traffic flow, the security between the staff of the sheriff and the court staff to make sure that it's optimal. This building's going to be with us for a long time, and you know, I think it's smart that we took a lot of extra time just to take a look at those options. So Sheriff Morotek is here as well, and he can more eloquently explain the reasoning why we took some more time to look at that specific layout for the courtrooms. Tim Hagberg is also still present. He's had some experience on you know, the maintenance issues that we've had within the jail, which was our last major construction project. And you know, just some comments perhaps if you've got questions about how that turned out and what we're looking at here. With respect to, you know, cost versus value, that sort of thing. You know, in the jail, they cut some corners that ended up costing us more in the long run as far as maintenance and some other things. And we're trying to find a good balance on that as well. So we've got a lot of things kind of to talk about. I'll let Mr. Keene kind of lead off with the information that he's prepared, and then we can have discussion about anything that you want to discuss. The options, you know, that we're, what we're doing tonight is kind of looking at this layout. We'll be also looking at the financing portion tomorrow morning in the Finance Committee, where we'll lay out, you know, the funding plan, and then we'll also discuss it briefly in the Administration Committee. So between those three committees, what we hope to do then is bring to the county board next week that resolution supporting the funding that would be required, the debt issuance actually that would be required for the funding. So it is in the budget, but we need to pass a resolution in order to issue debt. So that would be, you know, kind of what we're striving for through this effort, through these committees and the county board next week. So again, the purview of Public Works, you know, responsible for the buildings within the county's layout here. Got any questions, comments? Now's the time to ask those. So Mr. King, we'll start with you.
I've handed out a few of these to those of you I know who are board members. I want to save a few for tomorrow morning's meeting. I think I have a couple extras. Anyone who want another, anyone care for a hard copy? Okay. I think that Mike has been perusing through the slides. Is that who's been sorry?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to just to the beginning. We'll cover it real fast. So tonight, these are the topics that I want to cover briefly. The meetings we had today that Tom already mentioned. Some of you may not be that familiar with the project, and I just want to give you a quick overview in that regard. The overall plan talks about what Tom also mentioned, the options that we had discussed, talking about, again, the existing wing and the remodeling that would be part of that, and then the most important part being the budget. Go to the next slide. These are the departments that we met with today, and I apologize. There are 3 others that we met with that did not get on the list. That's my fault. That included, and you might want to add those to your handwritten copy. That included the sheriff, Mike IT, and also Tim maintenance. So those are just some additions to that. You know, we're talking about the vacation of Fifth Street, and that's what's illustrated in this diagram on page 4. You're familiar with that. Go to 5, just some background information on orientation, what some of the other existing functions are related to the jail and where the new road is going in. Some of the next ones just kind of, for my purposes, more than anything else, just documenting some of the existing conditions that we've got, that being 5th Street looking each way. As Tom noted, the new building will go from building to building, from the south to the north across the street. And so that's what will be vacated. The slide 7 talks about or shows you the plan of the jail. And this is the south elevation of the existing building. And pretty much from the left corner where there's an open garage, you have a little cursor. Can you point that out? Perhaps. Go to the left side of the building.
Okay, over here.
Right from that point, and then slide it all the way to the corner right there. We will be abutting the new building right up to that face right there. And I'll get into some of the details. That garage area to the left will actually be turned into some office space. And then there's a door that's hiding behind that power pole. That door is going to stay, and that's going to be an access point from the jail through this building to get to the courtrooms. And I'll explain more to that as we go along. Let's go then to the next slide. This is 8. This, of course, is the courthouse. The yellow is the courtroom. We'll be attaching to the north end of that. And then likewise, the pictures, the photographs below, we will be abutting directly up against the north face of that building. Little details, but certainly very important. When we design the roof line of the new building, we're going to have to figure out a way to incorporate the existing roof line into the new building so that we don't get snow drifting between the two. So there's going to be a little bit of work involved in that. I should mention also, you might recall back 2 years ago, we had the topic of the fact that this existing building does not have a fire suppression system, doesn't have sprinklers, which is fine. It's code compliant. We want to be sure that this new building that gets put in does not trigger that issue to come up. And so just again, planning ahead, there will be some firewall separations between the new construction and the existing. Don't be alarmed, you have 2 conditions like that already in this building. There's a wall down the hallway here where this building was added onto. And then the Health and Human Services building addition that was built on over here as well. There's a firewall, there are door openings, etc. It's just done every day. It just compartmentalizes the building into smaller pieces. And so then likewise, our new building will be its own compartment, but it'll have to be compliant with all today's codes. And so then it will have to be sprinklered. Yes, please.
Mr. Kane, you talk about tying in the roof lines. How do you tie in a flat roof, like what's over there on Doug's side? And then is this going to be just a 1-story building?
It's a 1-story building.
Okay.
I'm imagining that we're going to take the ridge line of the courthouse and extend that across the top of the new building, but that we will just abut Doug's building to that. That's what I'm imagining will happen. I mean, kind of in the biggest picture possible. Again, good questions, details. The courtroom wants to have a higher ceiling as you have now, maybe not as high as what it currently is across the hallway, but you want it to be higher. And if you look, go back one slide to go to 7. We're certainly not going to match that roof line. That's just way too low. The judge will hit his head on when he stands up at his bed. Well, he might, Tim. I don't know. You get a tall judge. Okay. Moving on, John. Let's go then to the next slide. One more. Okay, here we are. This kind of gives you the overall picture of the campus. You know the jail is to the north, the courthouse is to the south. The new addition, kind of diagrammatically colored, is the piece that's in the middle, with the courtroom and the jail, the judge's suite, and all the other associated things. We'll get into the details here in a minute, but there's some opportunities with this plan to address other issues or topics that exist within the existing courthouse. The main entrance to this building really is where the parking lot is, and that's on the east side where we all parked and came in. The ceremonial entrance is on the west side, but I don't know how many people come in that way. My sense is that it's more to the right. So this plan and the concept talks about adding a lobby space that really doesn't exist right now in the new building, in the existing building. And so that would be adequate in size for this, the number of people, the kind of people that come into the building. That place will also provide you the ability later on in the future, if you so choose, to create a control point where perhaps there's a deputy sheriff or there's another individual who is screening people to come into the building. That ability will exist within this plan, that you can then have that decision as to whether or not you secure just the courts portion, or maybe you secure the entire building. If you've traveled the county or the state rather, every county is different in that regard. If you can go over to Barron County, you can walk right through the building and literally go anywhere you want in any non-secure area. There's no attempt to try to keep that from you. But then you go to some other counties. We're working in Trumpeter County. That entire building is secure. You have to go through the single point of entrance to get into that. So we don't set policy in that regard, but we want to make sure that we give you the space that you can make that happen when and if that time were to take place. So then let's go to the next slide. And these 2A and 2B, the following slides are somewhat interchangeable. The differences are very subtle. I won't even try to explain to you what they are. But this slide will give you kind of a sort of an overview of what we're talking about. So up in the lower right-hand corner, there's that secure lobby that I mentioned before. And I should pause by saying it's kind of hard to see, but there is a green line that outlines the new construction. So if you start at the secure lobby, you'll see that there's a white long hallway, if you will, that is new, and then it swings to the left and kind of fills out the entire rectangle. That's the new construction. So we're using that secure lobby point to gain access both to not only the entire courthouse, but the first courtroom, the existing courtroom, as well as then the new courtroom to the north, and then all the related suite functions, the jury deliberation, the judge's suite, et cetera, so on and so forth. So in these particular designs, and this is where, Tom, we're going to kind of segue, I think, into, well, maybe I go through the whole thing and then we come back to this topic, where we're going to talk about another idea about what to do with the existing courtroom. So kind of just keep that thought in the back of your mind. That right now the plan is to strictly build the new courtroom with all its functions, do some remodeling within the existing building related to the existing courtroom rather, the judge's chamber, the jury deliberation. That is in the budget to be remodeled as well. as well as when we go up into the sheriff's office, some creation of some new offices in the that garage that I mentioned, that open garage, as well as a hallway and access through the existing portions of the existing jail. So that is, as Tom had mentioned earlier, one of the many benefits of this project is that we eliminate that issue of moving prisoners across the street from the jail to the courts and back. That is now all completely enclosed and separated. And so that we talk in the design of a courthouse, something that's called three-way separation, where you have both, you're separating the three elements that relate to a courtroom. You have the public, you have the judge and their staff, and then you have the prisoner or the inmate. And nowhere in a courthouse should they ever cross unless you're in the courtroom itself. And we're solving that problem with this solution. I mean, besides having another courtroom, we're also solving that problem, and that's a major security concern that we all know we have. So that's the addition. Like, any questions that you would have at this point on that? And understand that drawings are very, yes, I can.
Mr. Olson, go ahead.
No, this is Mr. Mark Hellwood.
Go ahead.
Okay, I noticed that on your slide earlier that HHS was not involved. I think it's the department that I would be thinking of. Now, I would like to see, since this is a new construction, the possibility of adding on I know this is going to sound kind of crazy, but maybe a clinic. This might be our only chance that we're ever going to have in this county to get a clinic, say like a methadone type clinic in the county itself. So it's just something I think we really need to think about, since we're doing a new construction, and like I say, we may never have the opportunity to get something like that in the county.
I made note of that.
Okay, just please, yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Okay. The work that is envisioned also involves some selective remodeling in the existing courthouse. So if we can go then to slide 12. I'm gonna ask that you.
Brian Bissonnette.
Pardon?
Brian Bissonnette, hand up.
Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead, Brian.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was thinking about, I actually like the location, and but my question is thinking about how you're going to transition the roof line from the existing courthouse, or from the existing courthouse to the jail. And I wouldn't want to be the architect for that. But with that said, is this building going to be built where 15 years down the road, 25 years down the road, they're going to be able to expand off of it readily, easily?
It's always a good question. Expansion, there's always the issue of the unknown. You know, what might one be expanding to? Frankly, there's probably some limitation to how this building could be expanded. You know, we look at the functions that are in those portions of the building. I'm kind of thinking out loud as we go along here. Will the courts expand, for example? Will there ever be a time where there will be a third courtroom? Perhaps. Certainly never in our lifetimes would that happen. There is certainly the possibility that, looking at the plan, that maybe it mirrors, that there might be a third courtroom that would be built where there could well be a parking lot now. This is to the left of the building. If I go back to slide 9. See where the parking lot is, the existing parking lot
Yeah.
of the other side of the building. Right there. There could be the possibility of a court addition to that. The sheriff's building, I think we actually talked 2 years ago. We did some sketches, some master planning for the jail, and that would not, this project would not affect that. Maybe to answer your question, I don't think this building would conflict with any future expansion. Yes, Tom.
Yeah, I think another point too is, as we looked originally at different options of adding on to this building, we found, several constraints on what fits into the existing building. So that's why this is a really nice option. It also gives us a little bit more space where there used to be street, which would now be parking. One of the things that I want you guys to talk about too is, the other two buildings, the vets building, the veterans building where Gary Elliott and staff provide those services. That's an older building. Part of what we talked about and what's in the plan is eliminating that building and moving the vet service within this building or another location. So that would give a little bit more building or parking area. And there's also the maintenance garage, which we don't use, for garage work anymore. But if you're talking future expansion, that might be another opportunity. And then the other option too, behind the jail, is the ambulance garage, and in between the jail and the ambulance garage is a forest building. And there was some discussion about them moving out of that facility, which then might give the county an opportunity to, acquire that and use that space if need be. So there's, a couple other options depending on what it is that you would want to expand and how and where.
Mr. Schuman.
So, Mr. King, option 2B then is the judge's preference. Is that right? Am I reading that right?
Yes, you read that
And
correctly.
what is the sheriff's preference?
I think this would be a good time to go into kind of what we talked about today. Rather than, the layout that is in the materials here, Sheriff and his staff, again, really looked at the workflow and how those buildings or how the courtrooms could be set up to accommodate better security and better traffic flow. And it would require remodeling of the current courtroom to kind of flip that around so that the entrances to both courtrooms are in the center, which provides that secure area. And I'll let Sheriff Marotek kind of expound on some of the reasoning for that.
And I think Tom did a good job of explaining it there. Safety and security for staff, public, and inmates is key, as well as staff efficiency. And we're looking into the future as well with staff efficiency. It hopefully continues to minimize staff to accomplish the mission to the best of the ability with the staff you have, or in the future minimizing that staff rather than having to, eventually as things expand, the longer we can go without increasing our staff, it's obviously cost savings. And I think probably if John explains what we talked about today, I think it would probably be easier to answer questions from there than, because I think a lot of it is kind of self-explanatory with the layouts that we talked about today.
So if you look at the slide that's on the screen and you focus on the existing courtroom, it's labeled circuit court. And then all of the colored boxes that are to the north of that, the judge's chambers, the jury deliberation room, etc. What we're talking about doing is taking that whole piece and mirroring it so that now the entrance to the first courtroom is opposite the entrance of the new proposed courtroom. And then the judge's chamber and the jury deliberation rooms would all be essentially where the gallery of the existing courtroom is. Clearly, there's additional work that would have to be done to accomplish that. But we would be working within the confines of at least a portion of the existing courtroom that has the high ceilings. The area to the north, the new building piece, really doesn't change as a diagram, but taking this piece and flipping it actually helps in other ways that in some details. One of the problems that we have right now in the current courtroom is that the door into the courtroom is right off the hallway. And there can be times when there's activities out in the hallway that could be disruptive to a court proceeding because you have just two doors that separate that. In new courtroom designs, we create a vestibule, two sets of doors. And that's what's shown in the new plan. Maybe hard to see, but you see these little blue boxes in front of the new courtroom. You actually go in through one set of doors into a vestibule and then into another set of doors. So we're eliminating some of that sound problem. It also gives us a place to put much needed small attorney conference rooms where there's a lot of discussion that happens between an attorney and a client and out of custody client before a case. And right now, probably a lot of that happens in the hallway. You probably see that happen prior to court cases. We provide those kind of spaces as well that don't exist. So that in fact, by making this change, we're solving a lot of the little problems that exist right now in the present courtroom itself and its design. Is that a reasonable explanation?
Yeah.
By mirroring the two courtrooms, it's going to make it much easier for court security deputies and court officers to gain access to both courtrooms, especially in an emergency or urgent situation.
So now if you have court security that are kind of in that new space, that lobby space between the two courtrooms, they can respond either way, and the distance is far, far less than what we are dealing with in the current plan, where you literally have to come down this long hallway to come back into this building. Yes. Yes,
So
sir.
would that then make it necessary to have an alternate entryway in order to be able to have direct access to the courtroom from outside for people?
It's an excellent question. So how can we do that? Let's zoom out of that drawing just a little bit. So you can imagine, see where the cars that are parked kind of just to the right in the diagonal? I think your comment is, would we then have the entrance to the courts at that point, I believe? Yes. And the entrance, so think a little bit about not only this court, but also then the rest of the building. And if I imagine that there is a day, someday, when you will say, we want to have a single entrance into this complex of buildings, then where should that entrance be? Is there more activity to the courts, or is there more activity to the general government, or is it kind of 50-50? I'm not quite sure. Right now, the way we're proposing this is that lobby, that secure lobby, as you can see, is really kind of an extension of the hallway that's just out here. And that's the point where people come in, and then they either go straight or to the south down this hallway or to the rest of the building, or turn right and go up that hallway along the side of the courthouse up to where the courts are. To me, that seems to make the most sense as to where to put the entrance. If you put it up where the courtrooms are, then you're asking everybody who's going to go to the rest of the building to have to come down that hallway and work their way to wherever they're going. You know, there's a little bit of a challenge in this old building that was built in 1962. Now, granted, it has the one hallway, but then it's hard to find things in this building. Let's be honest. But it's a question worth asking. Now, I have my own, again, as said, I think I have my own opinion that I think where we're talking about putting it makes the most sense. But I think as the design unfolds and the discussions continue with you as the committee and other people, it's something to discuss. And it was a good question.
I have a question that similar to what Mr. Peters had is, I like to see more access because of an emergency. You might have to get out of the building.
Well, you'll always be able to exit the building. And the issue of security in county government buildings is it's been with us now for at least 10 years, I think. And I don't know if this topic has ever been discussed or debated here at the board level. I know that there are lots of opinions in that regard, maybe not just in Sawyer County, but just across the board. Issues of government needs to be accessible. Why do you put all these barriers in front? Some people feel that yes, the judicial piece needs to have security, but then the rest of the building doesn't, and everything kind of in between. Yeah.
Good explanation. Thank you. All right.
There's still more to the project. I don't want to lose track of that. This is slide 12. This is the wing that we're in right now. You kind of have to, orient yourself.
Excuse me?
Take the drawing and move it counterclockwise, float so that you know where this relates to the rest of the building. The beige is the assembly room that we're in right now. You can see the clerk of court is across the hallway. You know the pieces that are in this plan. And back in 2019, when we discussed this project, we knew that the new court room would have some impact on the other associated departments. We interviewed them back then. We re-interviewed them today to confirm that what we had done a few years ago made sense. This plan that you have is simply that of what's existing there. If I take you then to the next slide.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you go back to the other slide for just a second? I have a quick question on that.
You're talking about slide 12?
I believe so. Up one, please. Go down. Yeah. Okay. Now there's a waiting area. Excuse me. There's a waiting area right in there, and I'm just curious. That seems like a pretty big area. Is it just look big on the screen here, or is it?
Oh, good question.
A little bit.
Please. The drawing you have, these drawings, I would say, are more diagrammatic than plan-like. They're placeholders for these various rooms. I think you're actually going to see that when we get to the sketch that we did today, we've cleaned that up quite a bit. They're waiting, certainly there's a need for waiting in front of the courtrooms. It's really a diagram at this point.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Go to slide 13. So essentially what we're talking about doing in this remodeling is that probably in no particular order, the assembly room that we're in here is going to be occupied by criminal justice and the Justice Point people that you've now hired here recently. And I want to congratulate you for working with them and bringing them on. I think certainly the issues about working to reduce jail population is essential for every county. And I think these people have a strong track record in that regard. And so I think it's important that the county give consideration to their needs as part of this project, both in the jail as well as in this building. And so, as we said a couple of years ago and today as well, we were looking to provide that space for them. And so the assembly room is remodeled into spaces for them. They're new to their job, and so we've given them some assignments to look at the space that we've got and how we can best use that for them. The clerk of court will have new staff related to the additional courtroom, and we're proposing a complete gut remodeling of their area. So other things that will happen by making the remodeling of the clerk of court, we're actually going to be able to expand the small courtroom as we're making that whole space much more efficient. The DA has some space needs that we're going to accommodate, no changes to child support, and then we're going to make some minor changes to register and probate. So that's just a quick overview of that, and that would be part of the project as well.
So if the assembly room is gone, where do we go for meetings?
Yeah, such a good question. We haven't solved that topic, I don't think.
That topic, as well as, the board meetings that are currently in a courtroom, we can have that discussion. There is some setup and whatnot during board meetings. Zoning meetings are in the courtroom. Is it something that you would want to have a separate boardroom / assembly room? Or we can continue to run the board meetings within a courtroom. We did verify that, of course, with Mr. Channing this morning, obviously. So, a discussion point, what direction do you want to go with that? And the clerk of courts area, this wing, those are things that certainly make it more efficient, but also, points of discussion that you can have as well. So just a couple other thoughts to put in your head.
Why don't we finish up the slides that are in, talk about the budget. So with the plans that you see, and we use a range of numbers, thinking that the construction, what we've talked about here is in the 5.7 to 6 million range. And it lists the things that are part of that. Courts addition, the court and jail building remodeling, the clerk of court wing. And then there is also in this budget a hefty number, over $600,000 to replace the veteran services. So when we talk about maybe comparing this budget to the previous budget, one of the biggest line items is the introduction of this veteran services. I think principally to deal with a building that is perhaps in deteriorating condition. It doesn't really have anything to do with the courts, but it's included in the budget for you to give some thought to. The non-construction cost range, the 26%, includes all the items that I noted here, plus a number of other smaller items. The big pieces that I should mention also, let me go back to the construction costs for just a minute, because I failed to mention this. When we put our budget together in 2019, we were intending to go out to bid in 2020. Now we're talking about a bid in 2021, and we've added 4% for inflation to the construction numbers. We've seen projects, not our own, but others, where a number is given without consideration for when it might be bid. And projects tend to linger before they're approved. And all of a sudden, a couple of years go by and the budget never changes. But then you ask yourself, well, why can't we have the same building? Well, you can't, because inflation ate away at what you have. So that's in there. We have fees for a construction manager, a few other things, and I'm being really pretty open book in this regard. If we went back and looked at the numbers we had before, I had 20% for these non-construction costs, and I'm now at 26%. The 20% was a placeholder. I spent some time looking more carefully at those costs, and it's 26%. So that gives you the project cost range, roughly 7.2 to 7.5. And then to that topic of inflation, if you go then to the slide, the last slide in the book, you'll see that I took the 7.5 bidding in 2021 and simply added the 4% going forward, compounded, and you can see the numbers and see what happens to the project cost. There will be a day when Sawyer County will have another judgeship. You're on the list. So I think that the project will happen someday. Whether that happens today or next year or the following year, I think is up to the board to make that decision. But certainly you know that inflation is not your friend.
Mr. Olson and Mr. Beisnet.
Mr. Olson?
Mr. Olson here. So while I agree 4% inflation is probably spot on, as a contractor, I'm paying $40 for a sheet of 1/2-inch OSB right now from Lumberyards. And I think, you know, I don't want to say wait, because, you know, I've been fully supportive of this project. But at the same time, right now, the price of materials is outrageously high. And I can't see where it's not going to come back down to earth. That's one thing. The second thing is, do we take into consideration the solar power on the Veterans Building?
To date, we have not.
Tim?
Dale, is Dale referencing, Dale, you referencing the solar power that's on the maintenance garage for the Veterans Building?
Yes.
That hasn't been in use for a long time.
Why not?
That had, if you take into consideration the cost of the replacement batteries, compared to what it was saving the county, it would cost the county $35 a month to run the solar, plus they had some component failures. And so, and then even when that system was up and running, it would only run the Veterans Building for about 35 minutes on a power outage. So, yeah, that hasn't been ran for quite a while.
Then we should scrap that system, or try to salvage the system.
When I reached out to some contractors, that's a pretty obsolete system at the moment.
That's horrific. All right, thank you, Tim.
Mr. Bissonnette?
Okay, thank you. Well, I was going to make a statement along the lines of what Dale was saying. Material costs are going through the roof, and I hope these cost estimates are in the ballpark. I assume they are. But going back to this construction, the way it's set up, I got to thinking about it. I was looking at it. Okay, so my question would be, is there infrastructure that would have to be abandoned in the street there? And if so, is the new infrastructure, water, sewer, is that part of the construction cost right now?
Yeah, Brian, this is Tom. I can answer those questions for you. In the agreements and the discussions that we had with the city, That all started when they were laying a new wastewater line through that area that is going to become the California Avenue extension. And so that's what started the whole conversation about this possibility. And so in discussions with the city, when we started talking about trading some land and options, the agreement that we have with them, there is a water line that runs under Fifth Street that would need to be replaced. So that water line would run, they put in a new water main in that California Avenue extension and abandon the water main that's under Fifth Street. There's no wastewater line under Fifth Street. It's just the water line. So the agreement that the board passed before you joined us again included about $400,000 worth of costs that the county would incur to abandon Fifth Street and extend California Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
So that 400,000 is in addition to the numbers for this construction project.
Yes.
Tom, how does this affect our financial plan? When we hired that consultant to look at this, so we wouldn't have all these spikes and up and down from the tax rate every year?
Yeah, so that
Put 2 million, right, into 21, and then you would bank 4 or 5 million to come with this resolution?
Yeah, well, the resolution that we'll talk about in finance tomorrow and would end up at the county board is to fund the entire project. It would be the authority to issue debt for the entire project. And in finance last month and in tomorrow morning, we'll be talking about the debt structure. You know, this year we issued debt for capital equipment, and that's in the plan for future years as well. So when we lay this new debt for the construction of this project on top of that, you know, trying to plan out, as you said, the smoothing, so there's not a big up, you know, spikes up and down in the tax rate, but kind of smooths that out so that people can plan more accordingly for, you know, what their tax bills are. So that'll be a discussion in finance, and then they'll, you know, then we'll roll that up to the board as well. So, you know, these discussions you have about the building today, the finance, you know, tomorrow we'll all, you know, you'll be experts in your respective fields when you get to the county board and talk amongst the 15 of you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions for Mr. Kane? You did an excellent job explaining things. Thank you. And you'll be there tomorrow morning?
Yes, I will.
Yes.
Yeah, just one last. Do these numbers reflect what the sheriff wants to do? Like,
Do not,
do not,
do not.
or less? I had to ask.
No, they don't. Can we have a number by board, county board? Yes, we could. And
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Before we do go tonight, I would just like to see if there's any response on what I brought up earlier, as far as the addition to a possible medical area for a methadone clinic or something to that effect. With the other committee members, what do they think about this?
I have a question for Mr. Howie. How big are you thinking?
Well, that, I was kind of hoping that maybe our architect could kind of look into that. I really don't know, guys. You know, I've been kind of trying to look into it a little bit, doing some looking into it, but I don't really know what the size would be. I've looked at the clinic down south here. It's not a big area, but yet I can't say. So like I say, I think this is really, it's an opportunity, and there's a good possibility that we will never, ever have the chance to get something like this in the county in the future. And it's something that, I mean, we keep talking about the epidemic and everything, but I really don't see us doing a hell of a lot about it except talk. And I think this is one way to actually do something and to try to, do something, go forward with something within the county and, help some of these people out. If we get some, right in the county itself, we may get more people involved in this stuff than having these people going, 2 hours down south or an hour north or 2 hours north or whatever it may be. Something to really to think about, guys.
Thank you for sharing that. I'll make sure it's brought up at finance tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Anybody else have any discussion or questions for Mr. King? Thank you, Mr. King. Moving forward, number 10, future agenda items. We'll be having the airport on the agenda with many activities that they have coming up that we're going to have to deal with, and that's a constant. Anybody on the committee have any other things they want to bring up together for the future?
Mr. Olson has his hand up.
No. Okay, moving forward,
Mr. Olson has his hand up.
Mr. Olson.
I can barely hear Mr. Helwig, but what I know about methadone and all that kind of stuff is absolutely zero. But I do understand, after being on the Health and Human Services Committee, that we do have to start looking forward to things that we're uncomfortable with. And I think he has a very valid point. And maybe that could be a future agenda item, because I certainly don't know what we need, but maybe we need that. I think that would be something we should look into. I think that would be absolutely fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, sure. Number 11, other matters for discussion only. Anybody from the committee have anything for other matters? Hearing none. Number 12, closed session. Pursuant to Wisconsin statute S 19.851E, for the purpose of deliberating and negotiating the purchase of the public property, investing in the public funds, or conducting any other specific public business. Yes.
May I make a comment for those that are online participating in this meeting virtually? Procedurally here, we're going into closed session, and then when we come out of closed session, we'll be back in open session. So I think our IT person is moving you into a waiting room essentially. So if you are interested in hearing things after the closed session, just hang tight in that waiting room, and then we would
There we go.
allow you back in after that.
Okay.
Is that correct, Mike?
Yes.
Do you want me to speak quickly before we go to closed session about Mr. Purcell's objection?
Go ahead.
Um,
Leave that open. Tweet, leave that open.
Oh, do you want him on for this?
Yes.
you already
Okay.
closed?
No, we haven't had a motion yet.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yes, please.
Just briefly based on the.
Rebecca, just a minute. Should we have this gentleman back on so he can hear your comment?
Sure.
Yes.
Are
Okay.
they all in?
They're all still there. Yes.
Proceed.
Tell us when you're ready.
Oh, ready. Sorry.
Okay. Briefly with respect to the comment made in public comments in terms of the appropriateness of whether this discussion is permitted under the closed session exceptions in chapter 19.85. It is when the county is discussing business negotiations, property negotiations, or anything relating to its property, closed sessions are appropriate. So I respectfully disagree that it's not appropriate for the county to be going, or for this committee to be going into closed session.
Thank you. So we need a motion. Committee members, we need a motion to go into closed session. We have a motion by Mr. Peters,
I'll second that if needed be.
second by Mr. Helwig. So we have a motion by Mr. Peters, second by Mr. Helwig, going to closed session. All in favor?
All right, see you
Aye.
later.
Opposed? Motion carries by unanimous vote. We have closed session.
Okay.
I
So,
want to catch Kane up. Grab it.
And that's fine. So we have to give a chance to Mike to get him turned back.
everybody's back on.
All right, thank you. Audience, thank you for your patience. We've had a lot to discuss. We feel like we made headway. So at this time, I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead, Mr. Olson.
I'd like to make a motion that we incorporate all of our new hangar leases, including the 7 that are in redundance right now, at 15 cents per square foot for a 10-year term with a 10-year, not 5-year, a 10-year renewal. And that would be for a period of 3 years with, after 3 years, the committee would redo this policy at a new rate.
Okay, Mr. Olson, I'm gonna ask you to repeat it so we can get it written down, please.
Certain. So that would be 15 cents for 10 years,
Okay,
10-year renewal. I don't think we should have to have them renewing every 5 years,
okay,
but that this policy is only good for 3 years and the committee will reevaluate after 3 years. So the new leases that would come up after 3 years would be subject to a different, potentially different rate.
okay. And how much money are we talking up front?
Oh, yes, Mr. Chairman, $1,000 up front and the remainder to be paid at the normal rate.
All right. And that's the second by Mr. Peters. Lynn, I'm gonna ask you to repeat the motion to make sure we get it correct, please.
The motion was to renew all current leases at 15 cents per square foot for a 10-year term with a 10-year renewal with $1,000 down. Review the policy after 3 years to evaluate the rate.
That's right, Mr. Olson?
Not all leases, all non-current leases, whatever we want to call them,
All
expired.
expired, all expired.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Thank you, Mr. Peters.
So then in discussion, Mr. Chairman, so if all the leases that are gonna expire in 2021, they would fall under this then, obviously. So you're looking at 2024 before you set a new.
That's what the motion is, yes.
There are, tell you briefly, by just doing a rough count of how many more are gonna come up between now and 2024, through the end of 2024. It's approximately 13 of the private hangar leases. So
13?
yeah, quite a few. I mean, that's,
So 13 in the next 3 years.
well, good. Yeah, let's just make it.
You know? Let's move it forward. All right. We have the motion, we have the second, we've had it read. We've had discussion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, committee. It's very important that we got this accomplished. And thank you, audience, for taking patience to hear us out. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.